Good morning slash afternoon slash evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt the energy drop? There's something incredibly powerful about a person who doesn't flinch under pressure, who doesn't explode when provoked, who doesn't allow someone else's chaos to infect their peace. That power, it doesn't come from how loud you are. It doesn't come from how quickly you can shut someone down. It comes from one place only, your ability to master your emotions before they master you. Every single day, you're exposed to situations that can trigger frustration, disappointment, anger, or even sadness. Whether it's a disrespectful comment, a passive-aggressive coworker, a manipulative friend, or a family member who just won't let you breathe, people will test you, sometimes directly, sometimes subtly. But they'll do it, and in those moments, you have two options. You can react or you can respond. Reacting is emotional. It's fast, impulsive, and often regrettable. It feels good in the moment, snapping back, raising your voice, slamming the door, but it almost always leaves you weaker than when you started. Toxic people want you to react. That's how they control the room, shift the blame, and make you look like the problem. So when you explode, you're actually doing their job for them. Why give them that win? On the other hand, responding is intelligent. It's deliberate. It's measured. You're not ignoring the issue. You're simply refusing to hand over your power. You're stepping back, observing the situation, checking in with yourself, and then making a choice. That gap between trigger and reaction, that's where your power lies. But let's be real. This isn't easy. Mastering your emotions doesn't mean you don't feel them. It means you feel them fully, but don't let them take the wheel. You can be angry and still stay calm. You can be deeply hurt and still maintain composure. You can feel the fire rising in your chest and choose not to set the room on fire. That is mastery. This kind of self-control is especially important when dealing with toxic people. Why? Because toxic people are experts at emotional manipulation. They'll bait you with insults disguised as jokes. They'll act like victims after treating you like dirt. They'll provoke you just enough to make you look crazy when you finally snap. You can't fight that kind of behavior with raw emotion. It's like throwing gasoline on a fire. The more emotionally reactive you become, the more control they gain. Instead, imagine walking into the same situation like a trained agent. You see everything, you hear everything, but you give nothing away. You're aware of their tactics, you're prepared for their triggers, but you don't bite. You stay cool, you stay sharp, you stay in control of you. That's the real win. That's the real power. People often think that emotional control means suppressing your feelings. Not true. Suppression is denial. It builds up, it backfires, and it eventually breaks. What we're talking about here is regulation. It's about understanding your feelings, naming them, and knowing what to do with them. It's pausing before you speak, breathing before you act, asking yourself, is this worth my energy? Is this person even capable of hearing me right now? Or am I just being dragged into their storm? It takes practice. You won't always get it right. There will be moments when someone says something so disrespectful, so out of line, that your body just wants to explode. You'll feel the heat rise. You'll feel the urge to clap back. But if you can pause, even for 5 seconds, you change everything. You shift from being emotionally hijacked to mentally prepared, and in that shift you gain clarity. You realize that not every battle is worth fighting. Not every insult deserves a response, and not every person has earned the right to disturb your peace. You start to realize that emotional mastery isn't about impressing other people. It's about protecting yourself. Your peace, your focus, your energy. When you master your emotions, you stop leaking power. You stop making decisions you'll regret later. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't even care to understand you. And perhaps most importantly, you stop letting other people dictate who you are. You become the one in charge, not your triggers, not your ego, not their behavior, you. That's what mastering your emotions really means. Not perfection, not detachment, just power, in its calmest, clearest, most untouchable form. And when you carry that into the world, you're unshakable. No one can use your emotions against you, because they're not holding the controls anymore. You are. There's a quiet kind of strength that often goes unnoticed. The strength to stay still when everything in you wants to move. to watch when you're itching to speak, to observe when your instincts are screaming to react. That strength is what separates impulsive responders from powerful people. In a world that pushes you to speak up fast, fire back instantly, defend yourself right now, it takes serious discipline to choose observation over reaction. But why does this matter so much? Because reacting blindly to every situation that pokes at you is like handing someone the remote control to your life. They push your buttons, and you dance, you fume. You say things you didn't mean, send that text you shouldn't have, storm out of rooms you might need to walk back into. And for what? For a fleeting sense of release that usually comes with a long-term consequence. Toxic people in particular know exactly how to provoke this kind of reaction. They live for it. They will test your patience, twist your words, roll their eyes just enough to trigger you, and then act innocent when you lose your cool. That's their playbook. They know how to make you look like the problem. And when you react emotionally, you give them everything they need to spin that story. But when you observe instead of reacting, when you choose to be aware rather than impulsive, you strip them of their power. You become unreadable. You stop playing the part they wrote for you. Choosing to observe doesn't mean you're weak or passive. In fact, it's the opposite. It means you're gathering data. You're seeing what's really happening, not just what's happening to you. You're giving yourself space to understand the full picture before you move. Think of it like a chess game. Reacting emotionally is like moving your queen in a panic because your pawn was taken. Observing means you study the board, notice your opponent's patterns, and calculate your next step with precision. The difference, one leads to regret, the other leads to control, and let's be honest, most people react because they're uncomfortable sitting in silence. They think they have to fill every gap, answer every jab, respond to every attack, but silence is powerful, stillness is powerful. You don't need to have an answer right away. In fact, sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing. Let their words hang in the air, let their energy fall flat, let their manipulation echo back to them, while you remain unmoved, unbothered, in control. There's also something else that happens when you choose to observe. You begin to see patterns. Toxic people don't just operate randomly, they repeat themselves, the same digs, the same passive-aggressive jokes, the same guilt trips, the same backhanded compliments, and once you see the pattern, you stop personalizing their behavior. You stop thinking, "What did I do wrong?" and start realizing, this is who they are. That shift alone is powerful. It frees you from the cycle of self-blame and puts you in a position of choice. Observing over reacting also gives you the upper hand in communication. When you listen more than you speak, people show you who they are. They reveal their insecurities, their motives, their manipulation tactics. You just have to be paying attention. Don't just hear what they say. Watch how they say it. Listen to what they don't say. Notice the body language, the tone, the timing. It all matters. And when you take all that in before you respond, you speak from a place of wisdom, not woundedness. Let's be clear, this isn't about being emotionless. This is about being emotionally intelligent. It's about understanding that your initial emotional reaction is often a signal, not a strategy. Feel it, but don't let it speak for you. Pause, breathe, observe. Ask yourself, what's actually going on here? What are they trying to get out of me? What do I want to walk away with from this moment? That pause, those few seconds of silence, can save relationships, reputations, jobs, and peace of mind. They can stop you from saying the one thing you'll regret for years. They can prevent you from escalating something that should have ended with a shrug. And most of all, they can remind you that you are in control, not them, not the situation, not your anger. Anyone can react, that's easy, that's natural, but to observe, to sit in that space and choose your next move like it matters, that's uncommon, that's skill. That's what makes you untouchable in a world full of chaos. There's a dangerous trap that many people fall into when dealing with toxic individuals. It's subtle, it's sneaky, and it feels justified at the time. It's the trap of engagement. You think you're defending yourself. You think you're correcting them, you think you're holding them accountable, but what you're actually doing, without even realizing it, is playing their game, and when you play their game, you lose every single time. Toxic people don't fight fair. They twist words, reframe facts, and paint themselves as the victim no matter how much damage they've caused. They poke at your insecurities, they provoke you, then call you the aggressor. They say something outrageous just to get a rise out of you, and the second you react, game on. They've got you exactly where they want you, off balance, emotional, and distracted from the truth, and it's easy to fall for it. Because when someone lies about you, insults you, undermines your reputation, or disrespects you in front of others, of course you want to respond, of course you want to call them out, of course you want to win the argument. But here's the truth. Toxic people don't want resolution, they want reaction, they want drama, they want to see if they can pull you out of character. They feed on your energy, your confusion, your anger. And every time you engage, you're giving them exactly what they came for. What makes it worse is that their game is designed to be unwinnable. You bring logic, they bring deflection. You bring facts, they bring feelings. You bring calm, they escalate. The more you try to reason, the more they distort. The more you try to clarify, the more they manipulate. It's like trying to argue with a magician while they're doing a trick. You're never going to get the truth because they're not working with reality in the first place. So what do you do instead? You refuse to play. You don't enter the arena, you don't swing back, you don't try to correct every false narrative or respond to every sarcastic jab. You rise above it, not because you're weak, but because you're wise. You don't have time to prove yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. Let them talk, let them twist, let them assume. You don't owe them your energy, your peace, or your voice. And it's not just about staying silent. It's about emotionally detaching from the outcome they're trying to create. It's about recognizing that not every insult is an invitation. Not every confrontation is worth your presence. You learn to choose your battles, and more importantly, choose when not to show up at all. That's not avoidance, that's strategy. When you stop engaging, you reclaim your power. You stop handing it over in every text, every argument, every attempt to set the record straight. You stop needing to be right and start choosing to be free. And that freedom, it's felt, it's powerful, because suddenly the toxic person loses their grip. They can't control you with guilt, they can't bait you with drama, they can't drain you with their dysfunction. And they hate that. They'll call you cold, they'll say you're arrogant, they'll accuse you of being the problem. Why? Because the moment you stop playing along, they lose their favorite toy, and that's a hit to their ego. But let them spin, let them sulk, let them rant. You're not there for the show anymore. You've walked off the stage, and you've taken your piece with you. It takes strength to disengage. It takes self-awareness. It takes emotional discipline, but it's worth it, because at the end of the day, protecting your peace is more important than proving your point. And the more you do it, the stronger you become. You start to see their patterns. You start to feel less triggered. You start to realize that silence isn't weakness. It's dominance. You're not avoiding conflict. You're rising above chaos. You're choosing dignity over drama. You're protecting your energy like it matters, because it does. You're not trying to win a war of words. You're walking away from a game that was never meant to be fair in the first place. When you choose not to engage, you're not giving up. You're growing up. You're stepping into a higher version of yourself, one that doesn't need to wrestle with pigs just to prove you're clean. You don't need to respond. You don't need to explain. You don't need to match their energy. You just need to exit the game. Setting boundaries is not about pushing people away. It's about protecting what's sacred. It's about drawing a line in the sand that says, this is who I am, this is what I allow, and this right here is where you stop. The truth is, if you don't build strong boundaries, you will constantly be building excuses for why people keep walking all over you. And when you deal with toxic individuals, unclear boundaries aren't just an inconvenience, they're a trap. Toxic people test your limits early. They push just enough to see what you'll allow. A rude comment disguised as a joke, a last-minute demand presented as an emergency, a guilt trip served with a smile. And if you don't respond firmly, if you hesitate, if you let it slide to keep the peace, they take that as an open invitation, and it never ends there. It escalates. Slowly, your space, your time, your emotional well-being, all of it starts to shrink under their control. You have to treat your boundaries like a fortress, not a suggestion, not a preference, a fortress built with clarity, reinforced with consistency, protected with consequences. You don't owe anyone endless access to you. You don't need to explain your limits to people who already know they're crossing them, and you absolutely do not need to apologize for refusing to tolerate disrespect in the name of loyalty, family, love, or professionalism. The hardest part, most people don't respect boundaries the first time you set them, especially if you've been overly accommodating in the past. The moment you start saying no, the moment you stop picking up that phone at midnight, the moment you stop accepting blame for things that aren't yours, they will push back, they'll call you selfish, they'll accuse you of changing. They'll act like you are the problem. Let them, because the people who get angry about your boundaries are the ones who benefited from you having none. And once you see that, it becomes very clear who's really for you, and who's just for what they can get from you. Setting boundaries is not about being rude or cold. It's about being clear about what you will tolerate, clear about what you will accept, clear about how you expect to be treated. And once you've made it clear, the only job you have left is to enforce it. Not with anger, not with threats, just with action. Calm, steady, consistent action. You don't have to yell, you don't have to fight. You just have to mean it. If someone crosses a boundary, you address it. If they keep crossing it, you reduce access. And if they completely disregard it, you remove access altogether. That's not cruelty, that's self-respect. You don't keep opening the door to people who only come in to make a mess. You can love someone and still love yourself enough to protect your peace from them. But boundaries aren't just for the loud, obvious situations. They're also for the subtle ones, when someone constantly talks over you. When someone jokes at your expense every single time. When someone uses just being honest as an excuse to be cruel. These small violations add up, and they wear you down. Your body starts to feel tense around them. Your energy drains after every interaction. That's your signal. That's your gut saying, this isn't okay. Listen to it. The thing is, we often wait too long. We wait until we're exhausted, resentful, even angry before we finally put our foot down. But by then, we're reacting emotionally instead of responding intentionally. That's why boundaries need to be set early and clearly, not as a punishment, but as a standard for how we allow ourselves to be treated. And once you set them, you have to guard them, like a fortress, not with walls so high that no one can reach you, but with gates strong enough to keep out what doesn't serve you. You decide who enters. You decide how long they stay. You decide what gets access to your energy, your time, your mental space. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. Every time you allow someone to step over your boundary without consequence, you tell them that behavior is acceptable. And they will continue, not because they are evil, but because humans test limits. It's up to you to protect your own. No one else will do it for you. So when you start setting boundaries, know this, you will be uncomfortable at first. You will question yourself. You will feel guilty, but keep going. With every no you say, with every standard you raise, you are not being mean. You are being real, and you are reminding yourself and everyone else that your worth isn't up for negotiation. When emotions run high, words become weapons, sometimes against others, but more often against ourselves. The truth is, the words you choose in heated moments can either build your credibility or burn it to the ground. Speaking with precision instead of emotion doesn't mean you ignore how you feel. It means you don't let those feelings speak for you. Emotions are valid, they are human, but when they lead the conversation, they tend to turn everything into chaos. Toxic people, especially, know how to pull you into that chaos. They provoke you, interrupt you, insult you, and then stand back and wait. Because the moment you explode, when you start yelling, crying, over-explaining, or rambling, they know they've won. You've lost your grip. You've stepped out of your power and into theirs, and that's exactly what they wanted, because emotional people are easier to manipulate, easier to blame, and easier to discredit. Precision in speech is not about being robotic. It's about being intentional. It's knowing what you want to say and why. It's staying rooted in facts, not feelings. It's choosing to speak in a way that cannot be twisted, cannot be taken out of context, and cannot be used against you later. Because once you say something, you can't take it back, and once you give someone ammunition, they won't hesitate to use it. In tense conversations, you have to think like a strategist. Before you open your mouth, ask yourself, what is the outcome I want here? Do I want to be heard, or do I want to be right? Do I want to express myself, or do I want to escalate? And most importantly, what is the cost of saying too much? Because there is always a cost. Oversharing, over-explaining, overreacting, all of it gives the other person material. And not everyone deserves access to your unfiltered thoughts. That's why you must learn the power of the pause. Just because someone puts you on the spot doesn't mean you owe them an instant answer. Just because they raise their voice doesn't mean you raise yours. Silence is not weakness, it's composure. It gives you time to breathe, to choose your words, to remember who you are and what you stand for. Let them rant, let them spiral, you hold the line, and when you do speak, let every word count. There's something deeply powerful about a person who doesn't flinch under pressure. Someone who, no matter how emotional the situation gets, speaks calmly, directly, and clearly. That kind of communication commands respect. Because it shows discipline, it shows control, it shows that you don't need to shout to be heard, and people listen more closely when you speak less often. But with greater impact, you don't need long paragraphs to defend your boundaries. You don't need to beg someone to understand you. You don't need to justify your values. Say what needs to be said. No more, no less. Be brief, be clear, and be done. That's how you protect your energy. That's how you keep your dignity. And that's how you avoid giving someone the satisfaction of watching you lose control. When you speak with precision, you also leave less room for manipulation. Toxic people love ambiguity. They love emotional outbursts because they can twist them into whatever narrative suits them. But if your message is clear, if your tone is steady, if your language is firm, they can't touch it. They have nothing to grab onto. They can't say you overreacted, or took it the wrong way, or blew things out of proportion. Because you never gave them the chance. It's not always easy. In fact, it's often hardest when you care the most. When you feel hurt, betrayed, disappointed, those are the moments you want to scream, cry, lash out. But those are also the moments where your power lies in restraint. Not silence for the sake of silence, but silence that gives birth to clarity. Then when you're ready, you speak. Not to prove a point, not to make someone else feel small, but to represent yourself with strength, accuracy, and purpose. This isn't about being emotionless. It's about being emotionally intelligent. It's knowing that the most powerful messages are the ones delivered with calm certainty, not frantic urgency. It's understanding that people remember how you said something long after they forget what you said. And when your tone is calm but your words are razor sharp, that memory sticks. You don't need volume to be powerful, you need precision. So let others yell, let them throw fits, let them get lost in their chaos. You don't have to match that energy. Speak like someone who knows exactly what they're doing, like someone who has nothing to prove, but everything to protect. Your voice is a tool, use it wisely, let every sentence serve a purpose. And never let someone else's lack of control steal yours. Sometimes the strongest move you can make isn't to fight harder, argue louder, or explain longer, it's to simply walk away. Not out of weakness, not because you're giving up, but because you finally recognize that the situation no longer deserves your presence. Walking away is power. It's the moment you stop begging for clarity, peace, or respect from someone who has no intention of giving it. It's the decision to remove yourself from the chaos instead of drowning in it. People often confuse staying with strength. They say, don't give up, try harder, be patient. But there comes a point where trying harder becomes self-betrayal, where patience turns into self-neglect, where staying becomes more damaging than leaving ever could be. That's the line. That's the moment you stop asking, what can I do to fix this? And start asking, why am I still here? The truth is, some people thrive on your inability to walk away. They rely on your emotional investment. They test your boundaries again and again because they've learned you won't enforce them. They know you'll argue, you'll cry, you'll plead, but you won't leave. And so, the cycle continues, the disrespect grows, the manipulation deepens, and the longer you stay, the more you shrink. But when you walk away, everything changes, you break the script. You remove the one thing they were counting on, your presence. You stop being predictable, you stop being available, and suddenly their control starts to crumble because what they never expected was your silence, your absence, your refusal to continue playing a game you never signed up for. Walking away isn't always loud. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. It's the unanswered text, the ignored insult, the canceled meeting, the energy you no longer pour into people who only ever take. It's not about slamming doors. It's about closing them gently, firmly, and permanently, because you finally know what you're worth, and you've realized that nothing good ever grows in places where you are constantly doubted, disrespected, or dismissed. And yes, it hurts. Leaving always hurts, even when it's necessary, even when it's the right thing to do, because you're not just walking away from a person, you're walking away from the hope that they might change. From the fantasy you held onto, from the effort you poured into making things work. But what hurts more, what cuts deeper, is staying where you are not seen, not heard, not valued. There's this idea that endurance is noble, that staying through anything is a sign of strength. But endurance without direction is just stagnation. Staying out of fear, guilt, or obligation is not strength. It's surrendering your peace for the comfort of others. And no one else has to live with the emotional debt that decision creates except you. You owe it to yourself to walk away when your presence no longer serves you, when your loyalty is being abused, when your kindness is mistaken for weakness. When you've said everything there is to say and nothing has changed, that's your sign. That's the red flag you can't ignore. Staying and hoping for different results only delays your healing. Sometimes walking away is the beginning of your real power. It's where you remember who you are, outside of someone else's opinion. It's where you stop begging and start rebuilding, where you stop explaining and start elevating, where you finally understand that protecting your peace is more important than protecting a connection that is slowly destroying it. You are allowed to leave the table when respect is no longer being served. You are allowed to stop trying when trying only empties you. You are allowed to choose yourself, because no matter how much history, how deep the ties, how long the road, you are still allowed to turn around and say, "This isn't for me anymore," and the world won't end when you do. In fact, sometimes it starts to begin. New space opens up, your energy starts to return, your clarity sharpens, and slowly you realize that walking away wasn't a loss, it was a return to your standards. A return to your values, a return to you. So the next time you feel stuck, the next time someone tries to make you question your worth, the next time your spirit feels smaller in someone else's presence, ask yourself the real question: why am I still standing in a place that no longer supports my growth? And if the answer is fear, guilt, or obligation, that's when you know it's time to walk away, not because you're bitter, but because you're better, not because you're weak, but because you're finally strong enough to choose peace over permission. Some doors aren't meant to stay open, and some paths aren't meant to be walked twice. Your future begins the moment you decide to stop looking back.